started, and if you want people coming along the way, that's fine. Before we start, let's just pray. Dear God, thank you so much for today, and just thank you for each person that you brought here, guidance. Thank you for the ways that you, I believe you're going to speak to us through this time, and I just pray that each one of us could learn from each one of us here. And so, God, I just give you this time right now. God, I pray that your presence would be here in this room. Lord, I just pray that this would be a protected room, and God, I just commit this session to you. Amen. Okay, so my title is, Am I Your Project or Am I Your Friend? And when they had asked me to talk this weekend, first of all, I was terrified because, and that's why I told them I need a circle of chairs because I was way too scared to think of having like rows of people and standing in front of rows of people. So anyway, because I'd rather, just sit down in my living room with you and talk to you rather than whole big rows. But anyway, so I was asking some of the girls from around there that are my dear friends, you can come on in. I started, but just find seats. I was asking them, what are the important things that you would have to say to people who are involved in youth ministry? Got a few more. This future. And so as I asked them, one of the first things that came up, one of the girls said, well, I hate when I feel like I'm somebody's project, like they just want to fix me and then move on. And I was like, that's so true, because I don't really like to feel like somebody's project either. And so that's where I got the title from. And as I was thinking through some of that, and first of all, I'll backtrack a little bit. And I live in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania. This is Juanita over here. And she lives right beside me. There's a youth center right there in town, and her husband is the director of the youth center, and so they live on top of it, and then I live in the house beside there. And before I moved to Honeybrook, I was involved in Cross Club, which there's someone here from Cross Club, maybe a couple of you. Are you from Cross Club too? How many of you are from Cross Club? Wow. Oh, I knew your sister. We'll talk later. But anyway, and so I had helped out at Cross Club. I had been involved in Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So I was involved in some ministry, and I knew I loved it, but I was really frustrated with the thing of driving 45 minutes every time I went to hang out with the kids, or then bringing them, 45 minutes to my house and then taking them 45 minutes back. And I was like, oh, I just hate this. And I would love to move to Canton or something, and it was that wasn't going to happen. It was just, I really thought that's not really very safe for a single girl to move there. So, I ruled that out. So anyway, over that time, Juanita's husband Merv called me and wondered if I would come out to Honeybrook and move in and be secretary there. And I got off the phone and laughed. I was like, yeah, right. I live in Holmes County now. I'm not moving to Lancaster County. But anyway, I was praying about it, and as I was praying about it, God gave me an excitement for it, and I realized that this is where God is calling me to. So I moved out there, feeling pretty clueless, and I don't know much about youth centers. I don't know, just feeling pretty clueless about all of it. And one of the first things that Merv had asked me to take there was a 9-year-old girl from town there to take her for counseling each week because something had happened at home. Her mom's boyfriend had tried to kill her little brother and was threatening to kill her mom, and she was watching, and her other younger brother was watching, and her older brother. And so because of that, the cops got involved, and of course, social services, all that stuff. And so they wondered if I'd be willing to kind of walk alongside her and take her for counseling. So I was like, yeah, sure. And so I took her, and we'd always talk on the way back, and she'd always be like, the counselor doesn't really even ask me any questions, doesn't really even say much, but she's like, I just like going so that we can talk. Mm-hmm. And kind of something clicked in me that I don't have to have all the answers. It's okay if I don't have all the answers, but if I'm called to walk alongside these people, then God has me there for a reason, and God, I guess, knows what he's doing. And the two boards in the back, I don't know if you looked at them at all or not, but Sierra and Sheena are the two girls that did those boards for school projects. The one is on self-harm, so cutting, and the other one is on Revival in Honeybrook, which is where we live. And those are 2 girls that lived with me for about 6 months. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if any of you have had anybody move in with you. Have any of you, other than Juanita? Okay. It's rewarding but brutally hard, right? So anyway, when Sierra came, well, I don't really know how it ended up that she moved in with me. I mean, she was doing community service with me. I was supervising her for that. And all of a sudden, she was just kind of living there. I'm not really sure how it evolved. But if she would have came to me and been like, told me that, I struggle with an eating disorder, I struggle with cutting, can I move in with you so that, you can help me? I'm sure I would have been like, no way, sorry, but I don't have any experience with those fields. But God knows what, she didn't tell me any of that, but instead she moved in and I loved her and I made her dinner and, just God used that. And so I'm sure that for all of you, as you work with teenagers today, there's a lot of big issues they struggle with, right? And I'm sure that you come in contact with a lot of things that you're like, you know what? In our nice little Mennonite background, I never went through that. But it's okay. It doesn't mean that you need to quick ship them off to, some other place. But God can work through you anyway. And so, I'm just glad. They call me Mama Beth in town. And at first when they started calling me that, it made me feel kind of old, and I was like, maybe kind of inferior about my age. But then I realized that, no, it's a badge of honor. And so, I think part of that is we're called to, I see there's some men, I thought it was only going to be ladies. But anyway, whether we're called to be spiritual moms or dads to them, to find ways to care for them and to love them and just to be that to them and to look for the little opportunities. So kind of as I was thinking of how it looks to be, what the difference is between a project and friend, I had to think of in the Bible the story of the Samaritan woman. And I'm sure you probably all know that story of how Jesus, he was going to Jerusalem. And first of all, most people would have avoided Samaria because it's not the place, it's not really the place to go. But Jesus chose to go through Samaria. So the first thing that I think is so important is that we are willing to enter their world. So does anybody have any ideas how that looks? This is a little too high. To enter their world. Or maybe to merge worlds. Because I'm sure you would all admit that we kind of have 2 different cultures. So how does it look to merge those?
Find some common ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to be willing to, like they talked about in the last session, to go to their homes. Mm-hmm. And to go to not just places that are comfortable for me, but to be willing to actually go over and to play games with them. Soon after I moved, there was one of the ladies from town there that she'd invite me over to play games. And her household ran pretty differently than what I was used to. And, if I'd watch her kids and, you go to get them up for school, you have to, they're kind of just laying everywhere all over the house. But, it's part of being willing to enter their world is what helps you to understand them. And I think that's so important. But part of that sometimes is, I think we're afraid, right? I don't know if it looks scary. And I would just say, one of the big things is, in James 1:5 it says that if we ask God for wisdom, he gives it to us liberally. And that is so true. And if you're going there because that's where God has you, then he's going to take care of you. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean just there's places in town that I don't go hang out. But then there's times that, this isn't a safe place, but I know I'm supposed to be here. And so God protects us. And I think of one of the girls that her family wouldn't really have been comfortable with me coming into their house, but I used to go and we'd sit outside and play games. And so we were sitting outside and the one time that I was there, and her dad got in a fight with a guy just real close. He was in a trailer park, and they got in this big fight, and I knew both of them, and so I was trying to, calm him down. So I was like, pulling the baseball bat out of the guy's hand, and grabbing him by the shoulders, like telling him to, start thinking. And it's not, I'm not saying go try to break up fights in bad areas, but at the same time, I'm saying God protects you if He calls you to be there. And there's, while I was in the middle of it, and while it was all going on, and they were, threatening to kill each other and whatever, I felt like I had armor on. Like God was protecting me. And yeah, I got in my car and I burst into tears, and I came home and I went and found Mark and Juanita and burst into tears again. And I'm like, I don't know what I was doing. But what I'm saying is, yeah, be willing to go where God calls you to go, and to understand what they go through. And also allow them to enter your world, to let them be a part of just what you do normally, Whether it's, I often think of even, because we live right in town, the one time, River Juanita, I think they heard something outside or something, and they went and turned on the porch light, and here those two little boys sitting on their porch watching them eat supper. And they were, right? That's like, let them be a part of it. Like, let them, have supper with you. Let them go with you, to a family thing if your family's okay with it. Like, yeah, don't just have it be an us and them thing. I think that's so important. So the story of the Samaritan woman. Next, after we see Jesus is going through Samaria, we see he got tired and he sat down at the well. And I think that's the next thing that is so important, is that we take time to be still. And I'm sure that looks different for everybody. For me, it's my back porch swing. But that is what God uses, is as we can hear him, he can do what we can't do of ourselves. I love, Leslie Ludy has a quote. It says, "It has been said by many great Christians that prayer is our secret weapon. If we desire to be free from every enemy stronghold over our lives and fully fortified to live the superhuman existences God intended us to live, then we must learn to pray." And that is so where it's got to be at. And I think pray specifically. And as we are being quiet before God, God will show us the ways to pray specifically that we wouldn't know of ourselves. And I think of even Sierra the one night I was praying, and I remember specifically that night, I was praying out loud and just praying that, if, I knew she struggled with fear a lot. It was after she had moved back home. And I was like, God, if there's something in her room that's making her afraid, show her to get rid of it. And I didn't really think anything more of it. And the next day, we were out on the swings in my backyard. We were swinging, and she's like, Beth, today I threw all my books away. She said, it was really hard. I really liked those books. But I was supposed to throw them away. And I was like, whoa. I couldn't have figured out. And, if I would have gone to her and said, gone to her room and been like, these are not good books. You shouldn't have these. She would have probably rejected it. But because God told her, she didn't. She wanted to do it. And I think if we can believe in those that we're walking alongside enough, that we can pray and ask God for specific things. Because the more you see those answers to prayers, the more you want to keep praying. And it makes you want to pray specifically. And also just the ways, I think of one of the ladies from town that comes to our Bible study. Juanita and I do a ladies' Bible study. And the way I met her was I was sitting in my backyard. I was just sitting on the swing. That's where I sit to read my Bible. And she came by and we got started talking. And through that we became friends, and she started coming around. But then she said 4 or 5 times, because I asked her before. I like to ask people before I use their stories, because I think it's really important for us to respect people. And so I was asking her if I can use some of her story, and she's like, oh yeah, sure. But anyway, the one day I was going from the youth center to my house, and they're right next door, so it takes about 5 seconds to walk there. And I was just out front there, and she comes by, and I saw something was wrong, and I was like, what's going on? She's like, oh, I'm going to Jerry's Pizza Pie to get pizza. And you have to understand that usually if people are going to Jerry's Pizza Pie to get pizza, they're not going to get pizza. They're going to get beer. And I was like, so I'll go with you. And she's like, oh, okay. So we start walking, and she starts telling me about how, her and her husband got in a big fight, and how, she's just gonna leave. She's just gonna leave. And so we, I don't think we ever got pizza anyway, but we walked around a little bit and then came back to my house, and she ended up being there for a couple hours that night, because her husband had left too, and yeah, he was out partying, whatever. But, so anyway, so we were talking there for a while, and finally, she went back to her house, and we she got set up with one of the couples from our church to start meeting with them, her and her husband, because they did decide to work it out. And then another time with her that I was taking about 3 of the youth center kids bowling, and I pretty much never in the middle of the week just do stuff like that, but I had the 3 of them in my car with me, and I was just pulling out of my driveway. I was like, just stop to pull onto the road, and she comes walking out, and she didn't have her little girl with her. She usually always does. And I'm like, Mandy, where are you going? She's like, I'm going to get pizza. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, well, why don't you get in the car and go bowling with us instead? She's like, okay. So she gets in the car, and so then, I didn't really ask her about it there because I had other kids with me, and so as soon as they were occupied bowling, I'm like, so what's going on? She's like, well, it's going to leave Bob again, and a big fight again. And so, we talked, whatever, and she went back home, and and it was just so many times that this happened, and I was like, whoa, there's no way that I could know exactly when she's going through those things. And she's not even going to text me and tell me. But God can do things like that. And so, pray for opportunity, pray that God would do what you can't do, and believe that He will. And so I think it's so important for us to remember to be still and to let God be the one that's doing the work. So in the Samaritan woman story, we have Jesus sitting down at the well, and who can tell me what happens next? I know you all know.
He asked her for a drink.
He asked her for a drink. It's so true. And I think that is another key is that we need to be willing to receive. And we need to be open. And realize that each person that we come in contact with has something to offer. There's the right receiver. And to look what they have to offer us. And I think of our Bible study a lot with this too, because we started it kind of as a way of, mentoring some moms from town that were new Christians and helping them. And I think for both of us, am I right, Juanita, that it's become our support group too. It's the group that we look forward to every week getting together with and sharing what's going on in our lives. And they speak truth into my life, and they pray for me. And, coming into this weekend, they knew I was terrified about talking today. And they were the ones to, I know that they are surrounding me and they stand around me. And I think if we can realize that, and one of the other ladies from that group, the way I met her actually is I was at Walmart, and one of her kids comes to youth center. And so I saw him there, and so I went over and was talking to her. And I was I have no idea even why I told her, but the week before I had quit my job. And I didn't really understand how it was all going to work because I didn't really know how I was going to have enough money to pay for gas and do all this, food and whatever with quitting my job. But I really felt like I was supposed to quit my job. And I think it's important when we feel like we hear a voice, hear God telling us something, for us to confirm it with our authorities and with the Bible. And so I talked to Juanita's husband, Merv, and he's like, yeah. He's like, I really feel like that's what you're supposed to do. And so I had quit, and this seat's over here You can come on up. And so anyway, I ran into her there, and I was telling her that I quit my job. And she's like, oh, she said, I need a babysitter for my little girl. She's like, could you keep her at night? Because she's a nurse, and so she works night shift. And so I was like, yeah. I was like, I think I thought about it first. But it was perfect. Like, it worked out, and I didn't do that for real long, but it worked out for a while that was like a great way that I could make some money and still keep doing what I was doing. And even then I didn't quite realize how big it was that she right off then just like asked me if I would babysit. But now that I know her and know how protective she is of her little girl, it kind of amazes me that she just asked me right there, if I'd babysit her, because she's super protective. And even now, like, Juanita babysits for her little girl now. But now, like, even if we would recommend, like, somebody from church, like, she wouldn't really be okay with that because she's just very protective of her little girl. But it's just cool to see the ways that if we're willing to be honest and just, be open with those around us, that God can use that. And I think part of that, too, is one thing that's really important is to have a mentor and to have people who will give you honest feedback, like who you can talk to about what's going on with you, and they will speak truth into you. And Juanita's been a huge one for me on that. I don't know what I'd do without her. And I found that when I don't listen to her and I go do something that she discourages me, then I regret it. But just, be willing to have somebody who you like, and if you don't have anybody, pray for somebody who knows you well enough that they can see you and they can see if something needs to change, if you're getting too busy, and but just somebody who will speak truth into your life. So kind of going back to the story of the Samaritan woman again, we have, so Jesus, first of all, he entered their world, went through Samaria. He sat down at the well because he was tired. He asked the woman for a drink of water. And next we see him speaking truth. And she probably didn't quite, we know from there, she didn't really understand all of it right off, but he was still willing to speak truth. I love in John 8:32 it says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And so we realize that we know the truth is Jesus too. And Jesus is the one who sets us free. And so to believe that even if, just like I said, that with Sierra, if I would have known, the things she struggled with, I would have probably thought, no, I can't walk alongside her. But to be take confidence in the fact that we have the Bible. We have, and that is, that has something to apply for every situation. And just to be willing to speak it. And even if we don't understand everything that they're going through, to still be willing to speak truth. And I know that's something it's been hard for me because I'm very much a mercy person. And so they tell me things and I just want to pity them. And I just feel so bad for them. And Juanita's helped me a lot with that because, she's very kind, but she's willing to speak truth. And, so even one of the ladies, when pretty much if there's stuff coming up that they're struggling with, relating to their husbands or something, I call Juanita and I'm like, oh, Juanita, you'll need to come sit with me on this one because I've just discovered I have no advice for them. When it comes to working through issues in marriage, I have no advice because, it's just not where God has me. And so, that's the beauty of the quality is that we don't have to have the answers for everything. Juanita has the answers for those. But anyway, so as just the one time we were sitting talking, and Mandy was she was sharing stuff, and I was in my head, I just couldn't put words to anything. And Juanita just said something, and I was like, that's it. That is exactly it. And just to be willing to speak what God gives us to speak, and not to use just cliche words. It's easy for us sometimes to have our, our certain Bible verses that we pull out for every situation like this, and our cliche words that we use, in this situation. And just don't leave it at that. I was reading a book just last week, and it's mentioned about how it said if the Bible was supposed to be like an encyclopedia, it would have been set up like one. In other words, like, if all the verses about fear, if we're just supposed to pull out certain verses, God could have done it so that all the verses about fear are together, all the verses, but he didn't. Like, all the themes run together, and it's all about like who the person of God is and about how Jesus wants to set us free. And so the more we can know that truth and to like let that truth change us, and then to speak that truth to them and to use that. And so just to not believe the lie that if you haven't gone through what they've gone through, that you have nothing to offer. Because that's a lie. Mm-hmm. You have Jesus, when he gave us the Bible and he gave us the Holy Spirit, he gave us everything we need. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't go for to get educated on things. I'm not saying that at all, because I think that's important. But at the same time, if God puts a situation in your path, don't be afraid of it. I love the one quote that Paul Tripp has. He says, God's grace is always grace leading to change. We sturdily refuse to condemn, but we also refuse to condone. We accept people with the grace that empowers us for God's work of hard change. Anything less cheapens his grace and denies the gravity of our need. And I thought, I liked that. So we have, I forgot to speak truth, didn't I? We have, first of all, from the story that Jesus gives us, we have to be willing to enter their world, to let our worlds merge, to be still and to allow God to be the one that does the work, to be a receiver and to realize what each person has to offer us, to be willing to speak truth. And then we see Jesus in the story. He tells her, he says, go get your husband. And of course that brings up, all kinds of junk. And sometimes we all have situations that there's a lot of junk into, right? And yet we see that in the way Jesus did it, it wasn't at all condemning. Jesus wasn't saying, I'm speaking this truth, but, look at how you're living now. Something's got to change. But no, he didn't condemn her. But he brought up what was going on. And we see that from that, a few verses later, then it says that she told a whole bunch of other Samaritans about Jesus. And then it talks about how, they asked him to stay there, and he stayed there. And he, there were a whole bunch of people from that town won to the Lord because of her. She had a bad reputation. She's not the person that you really picked to be your spokeswoman for a town. And yet, she was equipped in a way that that she could. And so, the next thing I have is equip. And I think there's a couple parts to that. One thing is for us to truly trust God enough to believe in people. And I look at back there, Sheena's board that she did on revival for Honeybrook. That's for our town. And I'm like, you know what? We so often have such a small view. We think, so Sierra could just quit cutting. God has a way bigger view of that. God's saying, no, he's saying, yeah, they'll quit that. But I'm going to use them to bring this whole town to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And part of that means us being willing to walk alongside them in the practical ways too. And so as that junk comes up, because believe me, if you haven't yet, when you start working with people, there's a lot of junk that comes up. But be willing to go through that with them. And it's gonna look different every time. Sometimes it means giving somebody a safe place to be. And sometimes it means, like I was talking about with the girls that moved in, sometimes it means coming up with a support group for them right where they're at. I think of one of the girls from town right now that's in college and was really struggling. And so it wasn't me that got it together, but we started a support group for her, and there's 6 of us in her support group. And so each day one of us like every day of the week, every Tuesday is my day that I email her and check in with her. And we're in a schedule where like every other week she gets somebody who comes and spends at least an hour with just her, just like talking with her, praying with her. It means like last time, I was like up in her dorm room, and it's amazing how stuff like I walked in there and I was like, whoa, like I had no idea how dark a college dorm can feel. Like it just, as you like walked across the campus and walked through the halls, I was just like, oh, it just was, it felt so heavy. And yet to be willing to, like in a practical way, you know what, like I can speak truth to her, I can pray for her. It's not going to be the same as if I come and sit in her dorm room with her and pray out loud, like walk around her dorm room praying out loud, and like find ways to equip them right where they're at. And I would say even with that prayer thing, and I don't know if you ever have the opportunity, but like that's something that some of the girls have asked us to like come and pray over their rooms, like in their house, like just to like pray a cleansing, like just to pray over their rooms. And that's been really powerful, and it's been so cool to see the ways that like they make those rooms then into their sanctuary, and to see them like plastering their walls with like Bible verses and just like all kinds of stuff, so that even when they're in their homes and the rest of the home, like the rest of the house is a mess and like it's yuck, that they have one place that they can go, because they like to realize like that is their, like they have authority over that place, like that's their room. And so maybe like they don't have anything, don't have much to say about what comes in and out of their whole house, but their room, you can still help them to like make that into a sanctuary. And sometimes it's even like, sometimes people do need like counseling, and they need to go to somebody who can help them with things that we can't. And so to be willing to go with them. And that's something that, like for me, I feel like I learn more than they do for every time that I get to go with somebody counseling. Because, I mean, everything that you hear, you automatically answer about yourself, you know, too. And so, it just is really powerful. But to be willing to help them set up, like if you, especially I would say with stuff like abuse and some things like that, to be willing to help them get further help, but not to just, dump them off on somebody else, but to be willing to go there with them, and to be willing to take them to each session and, sit in the session with them, and to be able to help them process it on the way home. And so, just look for ways to equip the people right where they're at too, in practical ways. And the last thing that I just have here is be sure you're helping those around you to go to God and become dependent on Him, not on you. Because I think that's so important. Like, we aren't trying to make people become followers of us, but we want people to become followers of Jesus, and just keep pointing them to Jesus, and keep helping them to see that, you know what, I need Jesus. I need to keep going to Jesus. And so that they want to keep going to Jesus too, and not just coming to you. So that is all I have for today. 12:30 is when it's supposed to be over, right? So I think I'll let you all head on to your next session. Thank you so much.